Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Microsoft Office Add-ins Community Call for March 11th, 2026. I'm your host, David Chestnut. Let's go ahead and get started. Joining us today are Sean Laberee, Principal Group Product Manager, who's going to be talking about an open letter and auto-open updates. Also, we have a special guest presenter, Maarten Stam, who's an MVP for Microsoft, who's going to be talking about hybrid Blazor-based add-ins. And we also have Arpit Sangwan, software engineer, joining us today to talk about temporary attachment IDs for added inline images. And we would just ask, as we present today, for folks to please keep microphones muted so we don't have any distractions to the presenters. Today's call is being recorded and will be posted to our YouTube community channel 24 hours after the call is completed. And if you have any questions as we go along, please type them into the chat and we'll answer those as we go. If there's any questions we don't get a chance to get to today, we follow up with a blog post afterwards and we'll post the answers in that blog post later. So with that said, let's go ahead and get started with Sean. Do you want to take over the presentation, Sean, or
I
can click
sure, I can take control.
Okay.
Good morning and good evening, folks. I guess I wanted to first introduce this topic a little bit. So for those of you who haven't been following, on our Office JavaScript GitHub repo, there has been an issue filed, which essentially is an open letter from 233 developers expressing their concerns around Office.js stability, security, trust. And so I think if, as a member of this community, I think it's worthwhile for folks to go and take a look at the concerns that have been posted there. And first of all, I want to say thank you to the folks who worked together to go and kind of pull all that information together, pull all that data together. The feedback is painful for us to hear, but I also want to say thank you for helping, break the ice on this conversation and helping us all kind of work together to kind of get to a better spot on this. I think it's been challenging for me, at least, to say, hey, how do we come to these community calls and talk about quality without, making it sound like we have a lot of problems. And so I like that you guys broke the ice on this topic, and I want to say that this is the start of our conversation, not the end of the conversation. So I'm working on the more detailed response to it. There's quite a few issues in it, and so that's partly why it's been just taking us a little while to get the response up. But I figured I'd use a little bit of this community call to talk over how we're thinking about things and how we want to pivot in order to better address the concerns that have been raised. The first concern, or one of the main concerns that I hear in the issue was around the future direction of web add-ins, of Office web add-ins. There are some folks who are like, hey, is this turning into another Silverlight? Or is this is this on the road to deprecation? And I want to make a clear and emphatic statement that our vision is that apps, add-ins, and agents are better together. And if you look at a lot of the investments and a lot of the changes that we've been making over the last 2 or 3 years, you're seeing that we're setting up the stage for these things with investments in the unified manifest. That has been a lot of work for us as a team in order to go and bring together the manifest for the Teams apps, integrating those into Outlook, and integrating them with Outlook add-ins, and now integrating those with Word, Excel, and PowerPoint add-ins. We've been making that investment because we see that better together world of all these things. And sure, you're going to see a lot of our marketing hype right now is kind of focused on the agent world. That is the context that we live in right now with the AI, prominence in the industry. But we see a key to unlocking even more power for agents is to expose these add-in actions to them as well. And so that's a place where we see the value of agents will help us over time accelerate our investments in add-ins and agents. But first, we have to do all this work to kind of bring those two things together. There was a lot of concern in the blog post around fragmentation, about things that work here, but things that don't work there, especially related to manifests. What I'll say is that is a statement of the complexity that our team is working through to bring together all of these things, not a statement of priority. Our job is to try and make a lot of these disparate apps feel like one thing. And that is a hard problem for us to solve. And so we would really like to eliminate a lot of that fragmentation that you're seeing, where things work on one platform, they don't work on another. And what I'll say here is my pitch to you folks is right now is the best time for you to help us test these capabilities. If you have an Outlook add-in or a Word, Excel, and PowerPoint add-in, now is the time for you to go and try to move these things to the new unified manifest. It's GA for Outlook. It is preview for Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. There's nothing that's forcing you to do that right now, but it's a great time for us to get that feedback in so that when you are wanting to move and are wanting to take advantage of that stuff, that we've got all the bugs figured out, fixed, so that you'll be ready to have a smooth deployment. And so I would love for folks to take advantage of it where it's possible. Add-in actions for agents is our ability for a declarative agent to be able to call into Office.js in order to do actions on the Word, Excel, and PowerPoint canvases. If you have an Office add-in, we would love for you to think about ways that you can build a declarative agent and be able to try out these capabilities and giving us feedback here. For the unified manifest and add-in actions for agents are really, really close for us to be taking the preview tag off of them and being able to mark them as generally available. And so now is the perfect time for you to give us feedback along those lines. So that I'm hoping will help us talk about this as the future direction for Office web add-ins. Definitely want to hear feedback along places where you're still seeing that, hey, we have concerns around that direction. And we want to make sure that this is the start of that conversation. The second, let's say my third bullet here, is that there's a lot of feedback around add-ins are experiencing too many regressions. And what I'll say is, one, we're sorry. We from the product team have been trying to get more on top of this over the last year. But we've had a few changing initiatives or a few initiatives that have made this job more challenging for us. One of them has been the Microsoft Secure Future Initiative. Launched about a year and a half ago, we have undertaken tremendous amount of security work across the whole product ranges. And that has caused a lot of subtle changes in the products in areas that haven't changed for a long time. And so part of the challenge we've had there is we've been playing a lot of defense against these issues in places that we just weren't thinking about as much as we should have been. The work to unify manifests and stores and deployments that I talked about previously is a very complex set of changes. And those were changing some of our underlying fundamental things as well. And so that caused some churn for you and issues. And then, of course, Office is not a static product. Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and Outlook are all innovating rapidly, trying to build the best experience for our mutual customers. And so layering on top of that, the other challenges we have the standard challenges of these products are trying to get better and better. And we are trying to make sure that we do that in a way that keeps your add-ins running. And so what I'll say is over the last year, we have been steadily ramping up our investments in quality. but I think we are going to do a bit more going forward. And so in terms of our quality focused investments, like at the top of the list is getting the unification of apps, agents, and add-ins deployment together. While it wasn't very much called out in the open letter, we have seen a lot of feedback from customers and ISVs and our own support teams that we've had some challenges around making sure that add-ins were consistently deployed. And so we're working really hard to get to that modern architecture, that unified architecture, where we can make sure that all of it is much more reliable, much more robust. And so you'll see us doing a lot of changes along those lines. Then for each of the applications, we have different but related quality improvement initiatives. So for the new Outlook, we have a pilot project that's going to create a more stable layer internally for Office.js. And our hope is by partnering very closely with the feature teams that are building Outlook, that we'll actually end up in a spot where we have a more robust platform that causes fewer surprises around changes for you and for us. We're also launching an investigation into how to expose an immutable ID, which has been a constant pain point for Outlook add-in developers over the years. In Word, we're going to be focusing on quality improvements in the APIs around content insertion, file extraction, XML handling, as well as content controls. For Excel, we're going to be doing quality improvements in the core Excel APIs, as well as reliability around custom function installation and registration and usage. A lot of the, and then in PowerPoint, we'll also be working on quality improvements there. When we look at those bugs across Outlook, Word, Excel, and PowerPoint, a key thing that we are going to be looking at in terms of which ones we prioritize are the ones that you have logged yourselves as part of the Office.js GitHub repository. So the more that you can keep that channel going, the better it is for all of us. And so we thank you for the bugs that you have provided. Over the last year, we've had a couple of challenges with Office.js, where we've had a few outages, one related to Microsoft Ajax and one related to the Azure front door that caused unfortunate outages. We are working on getting into a multi-provider cross-geo failover redundancy so that those outages wouldn't happen again in the future. We're also investigating the long requested NPM package. We've actually been working on this for the last 6 months, in part inspired by some of these outages, in part inspired by a lot of the feedback that you folks have been providing. What I'll say is we think that the best path for folks forward will still be the CDN, but we do recognize that there are folks that have IT admins who really want these resources to be hosted in a different location that they have more control over. There are places where you want to have that redundancy. And so we are working on that NPM investigation. I'd say right now, the key things that we're working on is figuring out how to make sure that we have the right security and update model so that if there end up being security bugs in the Office.js layers itself, what are our policies for moving the ecosystem to the latest and greatest? And so that is a conversation that we'll be having with you in the coming months. And then last but not least, I think that there was a lot of concern or a lot of commentary about how a lot of these issues were festering, that they're out there for a long time. They didn't feel like they were making progress on it. And part of that is we've had a lot of issues logged. It's a broad surface area. And so we have a finite amount of resources that we can work in Office.js. That said, there has been a tremendous amount of work that the team has been doing to address some of the quality concerns that have come up. And I think we've not done a great job at closing the loop on those on those bugs that we have fixed. In fact, as part of look at our research to go and reply to this open letter, we went through a bunch of the bugs and ended up closing a bunch of them because we realized we'd already fixed them and we'd resolved them in our internal tracking. We hadn't resolved them in the GitHub tracking. And so one of the things that I want to institute as part of these calls is a quality corner where we report back to you in the community what things we've invested in terms of making more progress on improving the quality here. Now, what you probably, with all these quality investments, we're gonna have a little bit more precision on what specifics are going to come up when I actually respond to the issue in GitHub. It will be us focusing a bit more on this quality and a little bit less on us creating new Office.js APIs. Our rationale here is that we want to make sure that we are focusing on a stable core for the things that are already in market before we go and create new APIs that enable new solutions for that. And so you'll see us have a little bit less announcement heavy kind of new things beyond the unified manifest and add-in actions while we focus on this quality over the coming months. Sorry, I'm just going to take a quick look at the chat to see if there's any questions. David, is there anything that I should respond to?
I'm taking a look as well. There's like one or two little feedback items in here.
Sorry, I'm just trying to get through. So there's some commentary about sorry, it's really, I think Juan's handling that. There's a question about, do you plan for better versioning in case of CDN hosting? All of these initiatives sound cool, but the most important is reliability and consistency, because otherwise it brings customer frustration, trust loss, and so developers' trust loss. So I think there is a challenge that we have here, which is Office.js is a thin layer over the underlying client products themselves. And so just giving a static version of Office.js doesn't necessarily solve all of our versioning problems and breaking problems. And so part of what you see, or we'll see as part of these improvements, we have this investment we're making with the new Outlook team to actually provide a more stable layer so that we're more intentional about how changes could impact add-ins that when they happen in the underlying platform. That is a part of our key that we're trying to figure out if that's a better way for us to insulate add-ins from those underlying product changes. If that's successful, then we can spend more time to replicate that across the other applications. If it's not, we will come back and keep iterating on that to get to a better spot on it. So hope that helps.
So Sean, one other question I see in here is asking if we're going to deprecate VSTO, because we have given up porting our existing VSTO add-in to Office.js because of lacking features and bugs.
So that was an interesting thing that in the open letter was there was commentary about how COM add-ins and VSTO add-ins were deprecated. That is incorrect. We are continuing to support COM add-ins, VSTO add-ins, and while we may not be adding new features and new capabilities there, it is definitely a viable alternative for folks that are still waiting for their solution to be available in a new web add-in model.
Sean, I'm not sure if you want to comment something around deployment. There's also a question around the deployment issues, unable to deploy add-ins and stuff.
Is there, sorry, can you read the specific one? I'm trying to find it.
There's lots of people who are not able to centrally deploy any add-ins to their tenants.
Yes.
Centralized deployment.
Yep. So what I'll say is this is an area of top concern for me and the team. Over the last few months, we've had a number of issues related to centralized deployment. Most of them have been sourced from the Microsoft Secure Future Initiative as we've been moving folks to more secure, moving these services to more secure token infrastructure, moving them into things that are more auditable. We've had a lot of challenges in that space. We're now working on putting more engineering resources on that problem to make sure that we have the right infrastructure in place for it, make sure that we are being able to respond to issues faster and more concretely. The last couple of weeks have been particularly painful as we've been moving our own services off of EWS and off of the legacy tokens that some of the Outlook folks may be familiar with, and moving that to a more to more modern architecture. You should see dramatic improvements in this space in the coming quarter, because that's where we're putting a lot of our effort to making that better. So if you are having problems with missing add-ins in your tenants or your customers' tenants, best things to do are to use the send feedback buttons in the product. That collects a lot of the telemetry that's similar to us asking you for HAR files for it, and allows us to go and look at those logs and see what's going wrong with them. But we are definitely working on resolving issues. So, yep.
Can I just add one more thing to that, Sean?
Go for it.
Just because I've been working on around documentation with the engineering team on some of this stuff. And I just want to point out, like, we are posting known issues as we come across them into the known issues article, which I'll put a link here. So that's a good place to keep an eye on what might be going on with deployment stuff. And then where appropriate, like we might be doing some message center announcements out to admins as well.
So Vit goes on to talk about how there is a lot of complexity. The channels, the platforms, deployment methods, and the challenge there. And so what I'll say is, yes, we have a complex set of platforms. My goal has been to get us to places where we have less complexity, but it has been a hard problem for us to go and solve. But I'm hoping I'm hoping that I can at least paint the picture for where things get simpler. Like from the WebView perspective, IE and Trident are gone. The old Edge WebView is gone. We have some places where we need to go clean up our docs. There's some places where we have to clean up our validation policies. We're working on that. But we're trying to get to that spot where we have fewer browsers that you need to think about and support. There is the unified manifest. That is where our innovation is going. That is where we need to get everybody to. We're trying to focus on that simple single world. And so the transition from Outlook Classic to New Outlook is also going to have dividends in terms of simplification for the folks that are investing there over the long run. Right now, we're in this awkward transitional phase where we have to support multiple things, and I recognize the complexity that's there. And so keep pushing on us in places where you think, hey, we're making unnecessary complexity. We definitely want to make sure that as part of our quality improvements that we're nipping in the bud some of these cross-platform differences that have crept in over the years, where we haven't been quite as coordinated about making sure that the API works exactly the same across platforms. Yes, Mark Reedy says we still get asked about submitting add-ins about support for older browsers. Yes, this is one of the things that we need to go and do the work to clean up. Great. As I said, I think of this as the start of our conversation. And so I would like to continue on having more discussions about this as part of our response in the GitHub repo, which will be coming up in the following weeks. I also want to continue this conversation in this community call in subsequent months. So I look forward to more discussion along these lines. With that, I'm going to switch to the next topic. Giving users more control over task pane auto open. So for folks who haven't been following our blog closely, we have had some user concern over add-ins for Word, Excel, and PowerPoint being accidentally added to their documents, and users being surprised and embarrassed when that happened. So the scenario was I opened this random add-in and I clicked a button on the ribbon just to see what the add-in was. Somehow the add-in went and added itself to that document using the auto show task pane with document property. And then when the user shared that document with others, they were horrified to find that that add-in was embedded in that document and pushing itself to others. And so we've had quite a bit of unfortunate feedback around that. We also had some customers who had notification storms where an admin had centrally deployed the add-in to their entire organization. Their users got prompted, oh, go try this new add-in. And it happened to add itself to whatever random document that they were using at the time that they got that notification. And then that went into a bunch of their the documents that they shared with their customers, and again, causing embarrassment. So our goal here is to make several changes to make sure that the user, especially the people who are authoring documents, feel like they are in control over when task panes auto open. And so we're making a series of changes here to give that user that control back to the user. So one, add-ins will no longer be able to set the auto show task pane with document property. Show as task pane will be restricted to scenarios where the user deliberately invoked it as well, so that doesn't become a workaround for it. So for example, it has to be invoked from something like a ribbon button. If this is a change we're making in the Office.js layer, we had an attempt to roll some of that out last week. It had some issues with it, so we quickly rolled it back. We're going to be making some fixes to that, and it'll be rolling out imminently. The second change we're making is if a user goes and clicks close on the task pane, we respect that user's choice. So it won't automatically relaunch on subsequent opens of that document. We spend a lot of time debating whether we should add a pin metaphor as well as a close metaphor, but ultimately we've decided that closing is the metaphor that we want to try with this, and we'll definitely be listening to user feedback along those lines. The third is we don't want users to be prompted to install an add-in except where it is clearly needed for the document to function correctly. And so our first stab at this is to say only content add-ins and custom functions will be things that would prompt a user to install, because a lot of these add-ins are being worked on within organizations, and so prompts to installs overall should be rare. Changes for 2 and 3 are made in the products themselves, not in the Office.js layer. And so those will be rolling out with what we call the February fork, which essentially will be heading production in mid to late April. And so we are making those changes relatively quickly to address this user feedback. Separately, we are working on a forthcoming update of a way to provide a Microsoft UI to make for actually setting this property again, so that we at least get clear user consent that they're adding that to the document. And so we think that this will discourage folks from just going and stamping their auto show task pane in every document that it's opened with, but it will enable scenarios again where it makes sense for the user to go and because it is a critical part, that task pane is a critical part of that document. Nothing we are changing will affect the ability for a document that is generated outside of Office to still have this auto show task pane property. So these are some of the changes that we're making for task pane auto open to better give users control over when it pops up and when it doesn't. There's a question from Michael Saunders, who I haven't seen in years, so it's good to hear from you, Michael. He's talking about, hey, this is a breaking experience for existing add-ins that users expect. Would it be possible to delay the change until the alternative pinning features are released so that users have a chance to on this? So given the intensity of the user feedback, we need to go quickly on this. And so we're moving forward with this change. In the interim, we can recommend that when users use your add-in, that you either provide an update in your task pane or to suggest to users, if this is an important part of the document, that they add some text to the document that they're sharing with others to help them recognize, hey, you need to go and get this add-in from the store, or hey, you need to go and use the ribbon button to bring up this ticker, the stock ticker, or the capabilities there. So as a temporary workaround, it would be suggested that to do a little bit more UI in your add-in that helps users think about that intention. Great. Well, if there's no more questions, then I will hand it over to our Maarten van Stam for our next topic.
Thank you, Sean. So, Maarten, are you ready? Do you want to take over the presentation, or are you like just screen share?
Let me share my screen here, if that's possible, at least.
Okay. I can see it.
Interesting. I can't see it myself, but anyway, good morning. I'm Maarten van Stam, and I'm here to tell you something about Blazor add-ins. I've been a Microsoft MVP for, I just noticed, 21 years. That's not really a coincidence, because that's also the year that Visual Studio Tools for Office started. I was part of the software design review meetings with Microsoft back then. And yes, I'm kind of old, as you can see here. That's what I do in my spare time, usually. But in my professional work, I'm working for Macabacus. That's a tooling ISV, building productivity tools and brand compliance solutions for finance and professional services. We recognize a lot of the issues that we've seen, like in the previous section of this community call. And we have been working with Microsoft over the past years, trying to rebuild our COM add-in that we have available and try to build that into the Office.js space. That's complicated, as you've recently noticed with all the previous slides for today. But we're trying to get Microsoft to collaborate with Microsoft and get the best available properties in there. PowerPoint is obviously a big issue because we are missing a lot of APIs on the PowerPoint area. That said, we have a Blazor add-ins currently in the Office add-in store. It's in the GitHub repo for Microsoft, but these are kind of outdated. These are based on, I think, .NET 8, I believe. They are the single instance repos. So what I'm working on is to make them, let me get that out of my site, to revamp these add-ins into the new Blazor 10 environment. We just had an update yesterday, 10.03, I believe. The difference with the old Blazor samples that we have in the current Microsoft repo is that they are not hybrid. The new repos will be hybrid. That means that you can run items on the server as well as on the client side. They're currently in my personal repo. While they're still under the development, it's in here, by the way. I've one for Word, PowerPoint, Excel, and Outlook is in the plan. To build one as well. So let me give you a little demo here. So if you're familiar with the Blazor boilerplate templates, that you see something like this. You see a home, a counter, a weather, and probably a theme thing as well. This is what you usually see if you build a standard ASP.NET Blazor application. If you generate it out of the box, that looks a little bit like this. This one is tailored to be in the Office sample. But you can, as you can see here, it is recognizing that the host is not running inside Office at this point. So you need to sideload the add-in inside your host. In this case, this one is in PowerPoint, and if you see them as the task pane option, you will see that it's starting with static server-side rendering, and it's now switching into interactive WebAssembly. So this task pane is currently running on the client. The benefit of that is that you can basically interop with the Office JavaScript repos, with the Office JavaScript APIs, and interact with your document. So if I click on this task pane here, you see something inserted here, but that's actually done by accessing the Office.js APIs and using interop to work with the document. There are also other options. If you look at and there's the suggestion for the design again, you can turn it off apparently. So if I go into weather, this one is actually running on the server. So if you look at this, you'll see that this one is running completely on the server. So that's not server-side rendered, not client-side rendered. You can do things like refreshing the temperature stuff in there. This is all still done on server side. But if I do like create a slide here, it's actually inserting a slide. It's using the same Office JavaScript interop options again to create a slide and to do some things with that, like bringing in the table that you see in the task pane and add it to the slide in here. There are other things like the basically the standard counter component, where you see that this is still running server side, but you also have options to use like the fluent UI options, where you can start implementing things like the theming that you can change on the add-ins. The benefit obviously is, especially if you are a .NET developer, in like the old times, Vista development was done by .NET developers, and when the Agave, the Office.js add-ins were introduced, you had to switch over to completely from .NET into JavaScript. This is somewhat like a bridging function, so that you're able to reuse your .NET technology knowledge and things like that, and quickly build your ASP.NET Core application inside your Office host. There are some other samples in here where you see, if I go to this page here and I do some insert text, this is some plain inserting text from JavaScript, but I can also trigger some functions on the server by doing a .NET interop. This is actually calling a .NET function on the server side, but you can also do the same thing on the client side. So you have all kinds of scenarios where you can leverage your functions and your functionality, and you can basically put it everywhere, because you can put it on the server, you can put it on the client, but I can even put it on like the page definition of this Razor component. There's a function in here, is a text from home. This one actually lives in the Razor page at the client side. So if I go in here and go to the home page, this is the UI definition. But if I go to the C# code in here, you will see that there's the say hello function, and that's JS invocable even while it's on the C# file. As you also can see in here, you can call from the C# side into the JavaScript, I should say TypeScript, because it's transpiled in JavaScript. But there's all these cross options that you can use to go back and forth between all these things. That's the PowerPoint thing. Let me close that one and see if I can bring up. You also notice it in here, by the way, this is interesting, because you notice that the server dropped off. I killed the server, but the client is able to notice that the server is now going down. When the server would return, it automatically fixes the connection, and your connection will be live again. So if I now go to the Word add-in, and let's see if I can kick that in as well. I'm just hitting F5 here. By the way, the templates that we are working on, or I am working on, are currently especially targeting VisStudio, the big VisStudio, but you can also run these things from VisStudio Code. And if you just go to the repo folder and use VisStudio Code to access this, you can do the same thing. So it's irrelevant what IDE you're using to do this. While we're on Teams, my machine always slows down, because I'm not sure why that is, but it's always happening with Teams. Let's see if it's finished today. You see that it's first, in this case, it first kicks in, oh, that's nice. My subscription got smarter. I like that. I like smart subscriptions. Now the server kicks in. There's the backend. This is basically the backend server. You now see that it's worded in. And the sample is already sideloaded in here. Here. You get this debug message, by the way, to be able to hook up your debugger to the task pane. Show why it's not loading. It's just slow today. So same thing, you see the same, like the styling. I try to keep the styling the same way as the other things. Let's refresh this as well. Oh, this is the worded in, I think. Well, so in here you see there's a say hello world option that basically interacts with the Word environment. And you see the same thing here, but you should see the weather application there. But instead of creating a slide, you are able to insert a table into the document, and you have the counter option in here, clicking your counter. But you can also do like more complicated stuff. In this case, this is an example to run through your content controls. So if I set up the document here, it will create like an empty document with some basic text in there. And I convert the paragraphs into content controls. I tag the content controls. So you should see that if you go into developer design mode, or the other one, properties, you should see that they now have a tag. And if I modify the content controls, like the layout, I'm showing the layout of these things. I can register event handlers. So that's kind of invisible, but if I inspect the document here and go to the backend, you should see that there is, can I blow this up? Yes, I can blow that up. You see that now the events are handled, like on deleted, on select change, on deleted, or a lot of these content controls on the page. And if I delete the first one, it just takes the even out, and you should see that the first even content controls deleted, and there's an event happening again. You can also remove the event handlers again. So if you don't want to monitor them, you just remove the event handlers, and now it's no longer registered. The worded in is actually exactly the same implementation here, like insert text from JavaScript and from the server, from WebAssembly, and from the home page. But I can also trigger like the functions that you just saw individually on the content controls page. I can also trigger them. Let me quickly show the function in here. Where is the content control thing there? That all these individual functions that you just noticed on the task pane, I can also invoke these things in one run and do every step like in consecutive steps in here by just calling into them, and then do the same thing. Now you can see the full run that I just did manually is also automated. While this still is in the C# side, it still needs to interact with the Office APIs. So that will basically reroute it to the TypeScript page in here. It's not the home page, this one. Content controls. Where you set up, you have the setup function and you have the insert content controls options. These are all the things that basically are interacting with the Office hosts. We also have another one for Excel. I won't be starting that one because it's basically the same pattern, but you can just go into the repo in here, clone in this case the Excel add-in, and then hit F5, and it should run out of the box. That's it, I think, for now. Are there any questions about this?
Thanks, Maarten. It's been a lot of discussion. Leon's been helping answer some of the questions out there. There was one question on debugging, like how the debugging works or if it works. And then I was also wondering, like, did you show this? Do these open in Visual Studio 2022?
Well, this was actually the repos. I just updated the repos for the latest .NET version 10.03. That's the one from yesterday. So you need to get the 2026 version of Visual Studio to do that. You can also use Visual Studio Code, but then you need to download the most recent .NET runtimes. But it should work if you have that installed.
Yeah, I think that's a cool aspect of this is that you can use these in either IDE. So that's cool.
Yeah, we try to build as much as our COM add-in has available, but that's not all available in Office.js, obviously. I think there's a long way to go, but yeah, hopefully that we'll see some progress there in the upcoming time. Let me stop my sharing if I can find my mouse somewhere.
Thank you, Maarten. If it's okay with you, we'll go on to the next presentation. So we're kind of getting into the call time. Yeah, that's super cool. I encourage folks to go check out Maarten's repo and those samples and give them feedback or PRs if you want. I'm sure, Maarten, you're all for that. So yeah, very cool stuff. So next up, I believe we have Arpit who's going to be talking about some item attachments, as I recall. Arpit, do you want the slide deck, or are you going to present? How do you want to do this?
However, I can share my screen.
Okay, that sounds good.
All right. Okay, let me know if it's up. All right. Okay, I think we're short on time, so I'll just try to quickly wrap it up. So, hey everyone, so this specific update we have is for changes concerning added inline image attachments, and that too specifically on Outlook on Web and New Outlook on Windows. So I'll just repeat that again. This change concerns specifically added inline image attachments and only on Outlook on Web and New Outlook on Windows. So I'll just quickly set up some context around the changes. So there's this Office.js API called add file attachment from base64 async, which, as the name suggests, takes the base64 from the add-in and adds the corresponding attachment to the mail. That's the expected behavior. Now this API can be used to add like both the file attachments as well as the inline image attachments. Inline image attachments, by the way, are actually the images which are present directly in the body of the mail. And these file attachments usually appear on top of the mail as these attachment tiles. So like as I mentioned earlier, scope of these incoming changes is limited to these inline image attachments added through this specific API. And what the actual change is that historically this API add file attachment from base64 sync has been returning a server generated ID for both kind of uploaded attachments, file as well as inline image attachments, specifically on OVA and New Outlook for Windows. Now going forward, the change is that this API won't be returning a server generated ID for inline images anymore. Rather, it will return a temporary client generated ID as part of the promise resolution whenever the add file attachment API is called. So in case the add-in has any kind of reliance on the server generated ID that this API had been returning, then there would be some changes that the add-in needs to account for. Otherwise, with all the other Office.js APIs, this temporary ID will work the same way that the earlier server generated ID used to work. Not to mention that because this is a client generated ID, it won't be uh, it can't be used to access services and can't be used to make graph calls or REST calls like the AWS ID, but the Office.js API calls concerning the attachments, for example, get attachment content async that needs an attachment ID can be used with these IDs. So is the case with get attachments async. So the Office.js APIs would work, but the service calls won't work with this ID going forward. Now getting on why this change has been made. So as I mentioned that like this is a typical scenario how this add file attachment API is generally used by the add-in to add inline images. So the first step, as I explained, is to upload. It takes base64 from the add-in, and the expectation is that the client uploads this base64 as attachment. And once this upload completes, what happens today is that we receive this base64 on the client, we make a call to the server, upload the base64, create an attachment, and then return the server generated ID to the add-in. Once all of this process completes, only then the add-in can reference the base64 of the image that was added in the earlier step, and then subsequently maybe add a body to the mail or add a signature to the mail, or basically use that image. For instance, here I added taskpin.jpg, and then I'm referencing that taskpin.jpg here. So the core problem with this upload first dependency is that it introduces two problems. One is that what if this is a server call? What if this call fails? In case the server call fails, the add-in execution fails. So this becomes a single point of failure. The add-in doesn't call set signature or set body anymore, and it's a end-to-end failure of the end result that was expected to be seen, maybe the addition of signature or adding of the body. And the second aspect of it is the latency. Since it's a server call, what needs to happen is that the server call needs to be made, the upload needs to happen. Once you get the ID, then the add-in can go ahead and set the signature or the body, and the user can actually see it. So to address both of these parts, now this upload first dependency is removed. Now when the add-in makes this add file attachment from base64 async call, we generate a client-side ID, which is a temporary ID, not the server-generated ID, and we resolve this call so that the user or the add-in can actually go ahead and set the signature without waiting for the attachments to upload. So once the signature or the body is actually set and the images are referenced in the body of the mail, that's when we actually upload the attachment in the background. But that's outside of scope of add-in execution. So this doesn't harm the add-in reliability, even if this upload call fails later on to the server, and the latency also is not a part of the add-in execution right now. So these are the incoming changes. That's why the changes have been made. If we have any questions, I can take them up right now. As I mentioned, these temporary IDs do work with the Office.js APIs. And also there's another API called get attachments async, which is meant to return all the attachments in the mail right now. That API, like as I explained, there is a scenario now when after adding of signature, there might be some attachments which are still under upload. In case those attachments are still under upload, the get attachments API, which is meant to return all the attachments in the body right now, will return the temporary ID for the attachment that I just talked about, which will be returned as part of response of this API as well. But once the background upload actually finishes, the subsequent calls to that get attachments API will return the actual server generated ID. So once the server ID actually gets generated in the background, subsequent fetch of attachment calls will return the actual server generated ID. Before that, a temporary ID would be returned, which can be used in that session to make those Office.js API calls, but actually not the server or graph calls. Yeah, so that's about it. If you have any questions, I can quickly take them up.
Thank you, Arpit. It's great information to see. I'm going to switch back to the slide deck. Okay. So let's go through the Q&A. These are questions that came in on our monthly form that we have. You can ask questions in advance of the call. The first question that came up is there a known issue with the Office add-ins buttons appearing multiple times in the ribbon? If so, what's the cause and the fix? So just for fun, I tried Copilot for an answer to this. It had some information, so I'm putting this in here. The possibilities are, the Office add-in cache could be out of sync. It does syncing of UI stuff. So you could try clearing the cache, which we have an article for that. There could be some duplicate command definitions in the manifest. So in which case you'd probably be seeing this problem on all clients or all sessions. It's also possible you might have the same add-in deployed more than once. This can happen if you had your add, it's both in the Microsoft Store and then you also did a developer side load. You can see this sort of thing happen. And then I would say, if it's none of those cases, then just go create a GitHub issue on our Office.js repo and we can do some more digging into it. Just let us know what's going on. Then next question, which I don't have an answer for because this question came in literally last night, so I just haven't had a chance to follow up with anyone. So might have to follow up later. Asking if there's an update regarding the ability to have Office.js expose individual members of a group in Outlook. Sounds like it was mentioned on last month's call that there would be an update in the developer blog on this, but there wasn't any update regarding this. And I did briefly go through our previous call logs and Q&As, and I couldn't find any information on this. So, but I'll follow up with the Outlook team, try to find out what's going up, and make sure we have an update for at least the next call, if not in the blog we post for this call.
I can give an update. David, I can give an update if you want.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks.
So in the backlog, we have an API to get the members of a DL, of a distribution list. But we haven't been, we haven't reached the moment to implement it in the backlog. We have not committed to do groups, and maybe this is a graph API you can use to get them. But hopefully soon we will implement the DL one. It's the update.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you, Juan. Then some updates to share. We have some documentation updates from the content team. So we've got some new content around how to connect Office.js with any JavaScript framework. So it kind of goes through the fundamentals of initialization and operating regardless of if you're using React or various other frameworks, which can be helpful. Understanding the logic of API requirement configuration. If folks could mute their microphones, that would be helpful. We also have errors when your Office add-in starts. Hang on one second. Okay. Errors when your Office add-in starts. You can resolve with possible errors that occur when the Office add-in starts. There's navigation patterns, as well as a first one experience tutorial. So kind of a lot of fundamentals stuff that should help folks out. And also for Outlook, we have a blog on preparing your add-in for Outlook ribbon improvements that are happening, as well as how to implement join and chat buttons if you want to have an online meeting provider add-in, which is pretty cool. Then we also have updates to the Excel reference APIs, so some updates for conditional color, card layout, and so on, as well as several new samples for Word and ScriptLab. So you can now export documents as PDF, and there's various other interesting samples here to go check out. I'll post all these links in the chat later. As soon as this call's over, I'll put them in there. And then if you're new to Office add-ins, we have some links here to help folks out. We got our documentation, of course. We have quick starts for all the different apps. There's Script Lab if you want to try out just implementing simple, it's a REPL kind of environment to try things out as an add-in. And of course, we have samples, the Microsoft 365 Developer Program, which is a great way to test and build add-ins. And there's also documentation on Office scripts. If you need to engage with a team, so if you have any technical questions, you can go to this link, aka.ms/office-add-ins-dev-questions with either of those tags. You can also go to stackoverflow.com, again, with the common tags we use to find and answer these things. If you find something that looks like a bug, let us know on the Office.js repo. There's a link to that there. And then if you have any future requests and ideas, you can go to the aka.ms/m365dev-suggestions link and let us know what your idea is. And of course, you can send a smile or frown from inside Microsoft 365 itself. This isn't the only developer community call out there. We have many others as well. There's links to them here if you want to go check those out on various areas of Microsoft 365. And to get a list of all of them, just go to the link at the bottom, and you can find all the invites at aka.ms/m365pnp. And just want to say thank you, everyone, for attending. There's a lot to cover today, so we ran a little bit over, but I think it was all good information. This recording will be available at the aka.ms/m365pnp/videos link. So go check it out there. 24 hours from now, we'll get this posted. You can follow us at Twitter. There's a couple tags there for that. Next call will be April 8th, second Wednesday of each month at 7 a.m. Pacific time. Now, if you want to submit questions in advance of the call, go to that very bottom link, aka.ms/office-add-ins-form, and you can submit questions there. We'll try to get those answered before the call. And you can also check out the agenda at aka.ms/office-add-ins-agenda. All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day, and we'll see you on the next call.